Tonight, as the curve flattens, Australia sets itself a 2-month target to get businesses back up and running. A 16th resident dead after contracting coronavirus at a Sydney nursing home. How the pandemic has led to a rise in racial abuse against Australia's Asian communities. And Melbourne Storm's move to Albury set to go ahead despite a council vote against it. Good evening, I'm Yvonne Yong with ABC News. The nation's leaders are setting themselves a 2-month target to have businesses back up and running. Figures out today reveal 1 million Australians have hit the unemployment line since the crisis began, and more than anyone, reopening the economy will be for them. The Prime Minister and Premiers are working towards a July deadline, and on Friday will reveal which restrictions are to be lifted or eased. Here's political editor Andrew Probyn.
Flattening the curve has saved countless lives, but destroyed livelihoods.
We now need to get 1 million Australians back to work. That is the curve that we need to address.
Those million Australians were lost from the workforce in just 4 terrible weeks. Businesses put into hibernation.
As long as these restrictions are in place, they are costing our economy some $4 billion a week.
That's weighing on the minds of the nation's leaders as they chart a path out of the crisis.
That certainly puts an enormous pressure, as it should, on the timetable as we seek to move Australia back to a COVID-safe economy.
To get there, guidelines are being developed on a workplace-by-workplace basis.
Whether they are a manufacturer or an abattoir or a cafe.
But reactivating the economy is a cautious business. Social distancing rules to remain for months to come, even if other restrictions are lifted.
We are in a great place, but we cannot risk this great place that we're in.
Some hospitality groups are expected to strongly encourage patrons to download the COVID-safe app, although they cannot by law require it. 5 million Australians have already done so, an uptake that'll help guide National Cabinet on which shutdowns should end first.
It's our hope that where we get to on Friday can sort of lay out much more of the roadmap for Australians so they can see what's happening in the weeks and the months ahead.
COVID-19 will be with us for many months, if not years to come. So learning to live with it as safely as possible is the only viable long-term option. The PM and Premiers want this new normal to be in place by July, in time for the school holidays. By then, the land of the long white cloud may be open as a destination, even if the border remains closed to other countries.
We both stand to benefit from getting travel up and running again.
We're working cooperatively together. New Zealand has a stronger biosecurity and border arrangements, as do we, and so it's the obvious place to start.
The rest of the world can wait. Andrew Probyn, ABC News, Canberra.
Well, the scale of the coronavirus impact on Australia's hotel and restaurant scene has been set out by the Bureau of Statistics. A third of hospitality workers have lost their jobs since mid-March, with both young and old carrying the burden.
Alana Dawes has played at the Sydney Opera House and Carnegie Hall. Right now, she should be playing in Helsinki. Instead, she's navigating the Centrelink website.
I've never engaged with Centrelink before. I've never had to previously, so it's a whole new game for me.
The arts has been one of the worst hit sectors, second only to hospitality. That's a double whammy for Adi Haynes, who works in cafes when she's not working as a sound technician at the Adelaide Festival Centre.
You might have a gap for like 4 weeks before you're jumping onto another show. So I would contact my boss at Pony & Co and be like, I got 4 weeks free, do you have any work for me? And then she would just chuck me on the roster.
The Australian Bureau of Statistics has looked at tax office figures, and the numbers are grim for those in hospitality. A third of jobs in the accommodation and food services sector have disappeared since mid-March, with Victoria and South Australia the worst hit. More than a quarter of staff in arts and recreation are also out of work, while essential services, finance and insurance jobs are holding up. Those worst affected are hospitality workers aged in their 20s or more than 70. More than 40% of workers in those categories have lost their jobs, and those who remain have had a big drop in wages. Economists say returning that curve to normal will take time, even if businesses reopen soon.
lots of people have taken a hit to their income or lost their jobs, so maybe looking to pay off debt or boost savings instead of spending. So it's going to be a slow road out.
A slow road to an uncertain future. Leah McLennan, ABC News, Adelaide.
Australia has recorded over 24 new coronavirus cases today, most of them in Victoria. 11 of the 17 Victorian cases are linked to a cluster at a Melbourne abattoir. 42 workers from Cedar Meats have now tested positive, along with 3 other people who'd been in close contact with an infected worker. The meatworks has been shut down for 2 weeks, and all of its 350 staff have now been tested for the virus.
I have to say, has been expertly controlled by the Victorian Health Department with very, very extensive tracing of contacts, isolation and quarantine.
The meatwork says it followed all the guidelines for preventing the virus. Meanwhile, a 16th resident has died after contracting coronavirus at the Newmarch Aged Care home in Western Sydney. An agency worker has also been stood down following allegations that infection controls were breached. 3 more staff there have tested positive, as well as someone working for the Nepean Blue Mountains Local Health Authority.
The coronavirus crisis continues at Newmarch House. Another death and another 3 staff infected. An infectious disease expert is now on site to try to work out how the virus is still spreading.
He's quite confident the procedures are being put in place and that we haven't seen cases in the residents.
Anglicare, which runs Newmarch House, has stood down an agency aged care worker over alleged breaches of infection controls. It's not known if they were the cause of the 3 new infections.
What's clearly gone wrong is that there's an issue around infection control, there's an issue around resourcing, and there's an issue around communication.
One message that is getting through is the economic shock we can expect. New analysis of ABS data shows the CBD and Mascot Council areas are likely to be among the worst hit, as are Cumberland and Fairfield, with their local economies expected to shrink by up to 12.5%.
The industry suffering the most are definitely retail and hospitality. They've had a reduction in business of around 70 to 80%. There's absolutely no foot traffic coming through, and we've seen a lot of unemployment rise due to that.
The Southern Highlands is predicted to suffer the worst downturn in the state by as much as 15%. Stimulating the economy will be key. The state government is investing in new prototype ventilators being built in Sydney and Newcastle.
I do like the fact that beyond a certain point in time we'll be able to rely on our own local high expertise, our own local manufacturing supply chains to be able to provide these ventilators.
Here at the Westmead Children's Hospital, staff will take part in a coronavirus vaccination trial thanks to a $10 million donation by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Kathleen Calderwood, ABC News, Sydney.
A health official has broken down while giving evidence at the inquiry into the Ruby Princess debacle. The hearing was told there was a failure to update the ship's log of sick passengers before people were let off in Sydney. The revelation comes as Carnival Cruise Line announced plans to resume sailing out of North America in 3 months.
Jim Hamilton's holiday on the Ruby Princess led to a 3-week stay in hospital with COVID-19.
There was a 70% chance they wouldn't come out of there, which is a scary thought.
But the Lake Macquarie pensioner says he wants to be back on deck and already has 2 cruises booked.
Where can you get a holiday for $120, $150 a day?
Carnival Cruise Line plans to resume services in North America in August, but in Australia a voluntary freeze will continue until at least September. Mr Hamilton is one of more than 600 people whose coronavirus infection is linked to the Ruby Princess. It's also been tied to at least 21 deaths. Nearly 3,000 passengers were allowed to disembark in Sydney in March after the ship was classified as low risk despite signs of illness. A public inquiry has heard fewer people on board were tested for COVID-19 than influenza. The Commissioner Brett Walker SC called it a reprehensible shortcoming from New South Wales Health.
Myself and my colleagues at the Public Health Unit were working very hard on this. We did what we could. And if we could do it again, it would be very different.
The inquiry heard the ship's low-risk category was based on an outdated log of illness on board. By the time it docked, the number of sick passengers and crew should have pushed it into a higher risk category and triggered state government intervention. The Federal Agricultural Department has told a Senate Select Committee it was aware of 128 ill passengers arriving on the ship in Sydney, but it was told by New South Wales Health there were no issues preventing disembarkation. Jamie McKinnell, ABC News, Sydney.
Racial abuse against Australia's Asian community has been on the rise since the coronavirus pandemic began. While it's been condemned by all levels of government, there are concerns the number of attacks may be underreported.
This is the moment shop owner Jennifer Lee is attacked after standing up for customers being racially abused outside her store. It's left her shaken.
Do I feel safer now? Because every time when I leave the shop, I still need to look around and make sure there's no any suspicious things happening.
The Australian Human Rights Commission has reported an increase in racist attacks this year. At least a quarter of victims say they were targeted due to coronavirus. But there is concern that many people don't know how or where they should report racial abuse.
The lack of understanding and lack of awareness of the legislation means that we find ourselves in a situation where we are now with underreporting.
Victims of racial abuse can make a complaint to the Human Rights Commission, but experts say the process is complicated, and this often makes it hard to come forward.
It is important to realize that there are real issues that can cause significant toll on your mental and physical health.
Federal and state governments have strongly condemned the spate of recent attacks and urged Australians to call out racism when they see it.
We've also got to be very clear in separating people's views about the Chinese government, the Communist Party of China, and Australians or permanent residents here who may be ethnically Chinese.
Australian Chinese did not cause COVID-19, did not have anything to do with it. In fact, Australian Chinese are just like all Australians. We are in it together.
Well, many members of the Asian community say they are scared by the attacks. They are also buoyed by those who are speaking out and offering help.
There's a lot of people actually helped me and give me advice on how to deal with these things. There's a lot of them, and they're all Australian.
Jason Fang, ABC News.
There have been emotional reunions in Italy and Spain as millions of citizens begin venturing outside for work and socialising for the first time since March. Strict rules are still in place to curb the spread of COVID-19, but families are now able to visit one another in the hope that the worst of the deadly outbreaks are over.
In Rome, reunions in the sunshine have been months in the making. Across Italy, grandparents who've been alone since February are finally able to see their grandchildren.
During the quarantine, we were desperate. Now I can't even speak for how excited I am.
When I saw her, my heart stopped. It seemed to be a century since I have seen her.
The pandemic has killed almost 30,000 Italians, but with the daily death rate at its lowest in months, a weary nation is reawakening.
Today is the first day. It's a good experience. We hope it'll continue in this way, with people not getting sick.
Manufacturing and construction businesses are the first to return to work. Spain too is gradually easing weeks of onerous restrictions.
We crave neighbourhood shops opening again. We want normality back.
On some Spanish islands, bars and restaurants are opening their doors, but tourists are being tested on arrival. In Moscow and St. Petersburg, the race is on to construct makeshift hospitals. Vladimir Putin has extended the lockdown in his country for another week. And the mayor of Moscow believes 250,000 people could have the virus in that city alone. The worst may still be ahead in Russia as the rest of Europe tries to find its way out. Bridget Brennan, ABC News.
Scott Morrison has joined world leaders at a meeting hosted by the European Union overnight. At the high-powered virtual gathering, the Prime Minister pledged Australia would play its part in a $12 billion coronavirus research fund.
We're providing $15 million Australian dollars to help develop COVID-19 vaccines.
We have to join forces and pool our money and our minds to kickstart work on vaccines, diagnostics and treatments against coronavirus.
The United States and Russia did not attend the meeting. New South Wales's Deputy Premier Nationals MP John Barilaro has launched a vicious attack on the federal Nationals leader Michael McCormack. Mr Barilaro has accused him of being a failed leader, and he's partly blamed Mr McCormack for his decision not to run for federal parliament in the Eden-Monaro by-election.
An anticipated exit from state politics, but a surprising attempt to enter the federal sphere.
I couldn't turn my back on, the communities that I'm seeking to represent. There's too many people hurt by this.
Andrew Constance has been the Bega MP for 17 years, but captured the nation's attention while steering his South Coast community through the summer's bushfire crisis. He says his commitment to their recovery will remain his focus as he seeks to run as the Liberal candidate for Eden-Monaro.
He's a very nice person. They're doing a lot of things for the people.
His local advocacy, though, especially when the Prime Minister dropped into fire-ravaged Cobargo, could prove problematic.
You're an idiot, mate. You really are.
The locals probably gave him the welcome that he probably deserved. At the time, I said some very strong words. It was great that the Prime Minister apologised to me personally at the time. And he and I both share this incredible passion around how we can improve Eden-Monaro.
He'll have to win Liberal pre-selection before taking on Labor's candidate, Bega Valley Shire Mayor Christy McBain. The Deputy Premier John Barilaro bowed out of running as the Nationals candidate, and a leaked text message shows he unleashed on the federal Nationals leader Michael McCormack. Your lack of public enthusiasm or support for my candidacy went a long way to my final decision. You have failed your team and failed as a leader. Michael McCormack issued a public statement in response. I respect John Barilaro's personal decision not to contest the Eden-Monaro by-election due to family reasons.
Of course I'd expect our leader to be encouraging people like John to run. In terms of these particular statements and claims that have been made this afternoon, as I said, I can't really comment on those.
The Premier too had little to say about losing her Transport Minister.
I don't divulge private conversations and I don't divulge in speculation either.
Gladys Berejiklian will now have to reshuffle her cabinet to replace Andrew Constance in a portfolio that's been plagued by billion-dollar blowouts of major projects. Ashley Raper, ABC News.
Perth's Supreme Court has been shown extraordinary video taken on the day the accused Claremont serial killer was arrested. Bradley Edwards is quizzed about his childhood, his work and his relationships, and repeatedly denies having anything to do with the murders of the 3 women who disappeared in the 1990s.
Handcuffed and slumped against a wall in his hallway, a dazed Bradley Edwards had just been confronted by heavily armed tactical response officers who had stormed his modest Kewdale home in the early hours of the morning in late 2016. After more than 2 decades, the Macro Task Force had finally made an arrest over the murders of Sarah Spears, Jane Rimmer and Kira Glennon. And their interviews with the accused killer were captured on video that was played to the court. Edwards appeared shell-shocked as the names of the victims were read to him. "You've got to be kidding," he said. "Why me? I'm innocent." He was asked about the attack on a Huntingdale woman in her home in 1988 and the abduction and rape of a teenager at Karrakatta Cemetery in 1995, offences he admitted to shortly before his trial began in November. But in the video, he denied having anything to do with the attacks, saying, "All the stuff you've accused me of, I'm not involved in any of it. I just want to go to sleep and wake up and this'll all be a bad dream." Macro Task Force Detective Joe Maripodi was the arresting officer who conducted the interview back in 2016 and took the court through the footage. During several hours of questioning without a lawyer present, Edwards was asked about his work, his relationships and his health. He told officers he'd suffered depression for a number of years. He also talked about his childhood as his parents watched on from the back of the courtroom. Members of the Spears, Glennon and Rimmer families were also in court for today's testimony. The trial has now been underway for almost 6 months. Charlotte Hamlin, ABC News.
A Melbourne man whose 20-year murder conviction was quashed because of the Lawyer X scandal is now suing Victoria Police for false imprisonment. Farouk Orman walked free from prison last year after learning that his barrister, Nicola Gobbo, was also a police informant. He's now lodged civil action in the Supreme Court, claiming Victoria Police maliciously prosecuted him and that he's seeking unspecified damages. The Royal Commission probing Ms Gobbo's behaviour has been granted an extension. It has to review the cases of more than 1,200 people potentially affected by her informing. For many Tasmanian children, hanging out with friends is one part of their social development that's been put on hold by coronavirus. Now, Facebook's launching a new app it hopes will help children connect under the watchful eye of their parents.
After weeks in isolation, 11-year-old Emma Hill finally can chat to her friends.
This is the living room with the couch.
Mum Kate has lifted a device ban to let her girls use Facebook's new app, Messenger Kids.
Because we've all been in isolation, it's been hard for the kids too to be isolated from their friends, so it seemed the right time.
The new app has taken off nationally, with children given profiles that are managed through their parents' account.
I get the feeling that it's quite safe. You can see who they've been talking to and what sort of text they're exchanging with each other and images and things, and it just gives us reassurance.
Child psychologists say it could help prevent online bullying if contact lists are kept small.
And I think it's really important for parents to have a conversation with their children around how they'll be monitoring the usage, just so that children don't feel like their privacy is being invaded.
So with so many apps available, why has Messenger Kids taken off?
Facebook is now the incumbent when it comes to social media. There are less people using the other platforms.
Social media expert Laurel Papworth says there may be legal issues with Messenger Kids, like whether moderators have working with children checks.
So it would be interesting to see if it complies with both the Australian and the American regulations for under 13-year-olds.
Facebook says its administrators don't contact children and they don't use their data for outside purposes. Alison Branley, ABC News.
In the NRL, Albury Council has banned Melbourne Storm from using its facilities for training. The club relocated to the New South Wales town today and had planned to start training tomorrow. But at an extraordinary council meeting this evening, angry councillors threw a spanner in the works.
Melbourne Storm made a break for the border today, but tonight their plans hit a roadblock.
We need to have one set of rules for everybody, whether it's the local sporting clubs or whether it's the Melbourne Storm. And it sends the wrong message, I believe, to make an exception for the Melbourne Storm.
The council voted 5 votes to 4 to stop the Storm from using their facilities. The Storm will now train at an Albury football oval and hope their health protocols will win over the sceptics.
I think once they understand the protocols, Catherine, they might have an understanding of how thorough our players and our staff have to go through them, and getting temperature tested twice in a day, first when they wake up.
It's a different story for the Warriors, who have been warmly welcomed in Tamworth.
They went above and beyond for us, and we're just really enjoying every part that they've had to offer.
After landing in hot water last week over an ill-advised camping trip, Latrell Mitchell enjoyed some good news. His COVID-19 test returned a negative result. And Gold Coast Titans player Bryce Cartwright has also been given the all-clear, despite refusing a league protocol which instructs all players to get a flu jab. The Players Association says he'll be required to sign a waiver before he starts training.
I'll be definitely getting the flu jab. I already got it. I got it yesterday, and as did most of the squad.
And the governing body has today confirmed the players have accepted a 20% pay cut for the season. Talk of a revolt, just another storm in a teacup. Catherine Murphy, ABC News.
Supercars Chief Executive Sean Seamer says it will be another 2 weeks before his sport announces plans to resume its season. The Bathurst 1000 is still slated to take place in its traditional time slot in October, with officials hopeful of staging multiple races before then. Seamer says the sport will implement strict biosecurity measures when it gets started again, so it can maintain its national footprint.
We've got a lot of flexibility around our calendar. We're working with all of our different state partners to make sure that we can get our championship away, and we've got a high degree of confidence that, based on the information we have today, we'll get everything away.
$16 million worth of lighting's being installed at the Sydney Motorsport Park, making it the country's first such facility to operate both day and night. The new head of Sport Integrity Australia says organised crime is a greater threat because of coronavirus. David Sharp says criminal groups could take advantage of pandemic-related staff cuts at sporting welfare and integrity units. He says that's particularly the case in women's sports, where players have been poorly paid and organisations underfunded.
Approaches will be made, money will be offered, for a short-term gain. And again, I come back to that we need to really work hard with the sports to ensure that we provide protection around the women's sports just as much.
Well, David Sharp will take up the job with Sport Integrity in July. He's currently head of the Sport Anti-Doping Authority.
A very strong cold front will move through the southwest corner overnight tonight. It's bringing the potential of damaging winds into that southwest corner. Also huge seas, which may also cause beach erosion. For Queensland, it's an onshore wind flow that's being triggered by a high pressure system. That's bringing quite a good chance of some showers anywhere along the coast. More frequent though in the southeast and also the northeast corner. For New South Wales, the northern rivers could see an isolated shower or two. They should clear up though as we move in towards the afternoon and evening. We're looking clear, dry, mostly sunny conditions across the remainder. And a warmer day across most of Victoria. Should remain mostly dry. There could be a little bit of high cloud about at times. This is due to a cold front moving towards South Australia. For Tasmania, generally dry, mostly sunny. Apart from the west coast, this is where we've got an onshore wind flow, so that'll just see the potential of a very isolated shower or two. For South Australia, the winds will strengthen due to this frontal system that'll move into the far west late in the day. We'll also see the potential of some raised dust through central and northern areas. For Western Australia, widespread showers and thunderstorms. They will gradually contract back to the western and southern coastal areas. Quite strong and gusty winds across most of the state. We're also looking at gusty winds across the southern half of the Northern Territory. An isolated shower about the far northeast corner and also around the Tiwi Islands.
And that is the latest from ABC News. I'm Yvonne Yong. Do enjoy your evening.
Critically acclaimed series are yours to stream free on ABC iView.
You're with me.
I am so much happier now she's dead.
Up for a game?
Kindness and love can change a man.
There might be more here than you thought.
The biggest titles are all yours. ABC iView, yours to stream.
Hello and welcome. By now, the disastrous impact of the Ruby Princess cruise ship fiasco is well known. Almost 24 passengers have died and hundreds more have been infected. It wasn't much better for the crew. More than 200 of them